If you think changing your name can erase your past, you've never met a man who rewrites endings. I checked the lock once, twice, 3 times. The metal clicked into place, solid, reassuring, exactly the way it was supposed to sound. But my hands didn't stop shaking. They hadn't stopped in 6 months. Not since I packed everything I owned into the trunk of a borrowed car and drove 1,247 miles without looking back. New city, new job, new name. Emily Carter didn't exist anymore. I became someone quieter, someone invisible. I worked morning shifts at a small cafe on 8th Street, served coffee to people who never looked twice at me, and went home before the sky turned fully dark. Safe. That was the word I kept repeating in my head like it could become real if I said it enough. Safe. Until yesterday. It started small. It always does. A black car parked across the street. Engine off. Windows too dark to see inside. It stayed there for exactly 12 minutes before driving away. I told myself it meant nothing. This is America. Cars park. People wait. Life moves on. But today it came back. Same spot. Same silence. I felt it before I saw it. That shift in the air. Like the world tilting just slightly off balance. I kept my head down, wiped the counter, smiled at a customer who asked for extra cream. Normal. Be normal. When I finally looked up, my breath caught halfway in my chest. He was standing on the sidewalk. Not moving. Not hiding. Just there. Tall. Still. Dressed like the city belonged to him. I couldn't see his eyes from that distance, but I felt them. Locked on me. Waiting. My heart started pounding so loud I thought someone might hear it over the sound of the espresso machine. He didn't wave. Didn't speak. Didn't step closer. And somehow that was worse. Because it meant he didn't need to. He already knew I'd seen him. Already knew I understood. I turned away first. I always do. That's how you survive. You don't stare danger in the face. You walk. You leave. You disappear again. I finished my shift with hands that wouldn't stay steady, clocked out 10 minutes early, and took the long way home. 3 extra blocks. 2 unnecessary turns. Always checking. Reflections in windows. Always listening for footsteps that never came. By the time I reached my apartment, the sky had gone gray with the promise of rain. I locked the door behind me. Once. Twice. 3 times. The familiar ritual. The illusion of control. I leaned my forehead against the wood, closed my eyes, and forced myself to breathe. In. Out. In. Out. Safe, I told myself again. You're still safe. But then the lights flickered. Just once. Just enough to make my stomach drop. And in the silence that followed, I realized something I should have understood the moment I saw him standing across the street. I didn't run far enough. And this time, he wasn't waiting outside. The lights did not just flicker, they died completely, and the silence that followed felt too heavy, too intentional, like the building itself was holding its breath. I stood frozen in the middle of my apartment, every instinct screaming at me to move, but my body refused to listen because something was wrong. Something was already inside with me. I reached for my phone, using the faint glow from the streetlights bleeding through the blinds, but before I could unlock it, I heard a soft sound behind me. Not loud, not sudden, just enough to tell me I was not alone. My heart slammed so hard it made my vision blur slowly. I turned, not all at once, not fast, because I already knew rushing would not change what I was about to see. He was there, leaning slightly against the wall near my kitchen, like he had been there long enough to get comfortable, like he had been waiting for me to notice him. Tall, dark suit, untouched by the rain outside. His presence filled the room in a way that made the walls feel smaller. I could not see his eyes clearly at first, but I felt them locked onto me, steady, unhurried, certain. I took a step back, then another, until my shoulders brushed the door. I had locked 3 times. It did not matter. Now none of it mattered. How did you get in? My voice came out quieter than I intended, almost steady, almost calm. He did not answer right away. He straightened slowly, pushing himself off the wall with a kind of controlled ease that made my pulse spike higher. Every movement measured, every second deliberate. You always check the lock, he said, his voice low, even almost thoughtful, like he was commenting on the weather. But you never check the windows. My breath caught. I knew I had closed them. I always did. I always made sure. But the certainty I had built my safety on began to crack under the weight of his calm confidence. I moved. I disappeared. I said, forcing the words out, forcing strength into them. You should not be able to find me. He stepped closer, not fast, not threatening, just enough to close the space between us inch by inch until the distance felt like a choice he was allowing. You changed your name, he said, Your job, your city, your routine. Each word landed like he had been watching every step of my life from the moment I left. But you are still you, Emily. Hearing my real name in his voice felt like the floor dropping beneath me, like everything I had built collapsing at once. I shook my head instinctively, even though I knew denial would not help. That is not my name anymore. A pause, then softer, but far more dangerous. It always will be to me. The lights flickered once again, then came back, dim, weak, barely holding steady, and in that fragile glow, I finally saw his eyes, clearly cold, focused, certain, not angry, not rushed, just absolute, like he had never doubted this moment would happen. I pressed my back harder against the door, my fingers searching blindly for the lock, as if touching it could somehow bring control back. What do you want from me? I asked, and this time my voice did not stay steady. He stopped just a few feet away, close enough that I could feel the quiet gravity of him. Without a single touch, his gaze dropped briefly to my shaking hands, then returned to my face. And when he spoke, the words were simple, calm, final. You already know. A beat of silence stretched between us long enough for my fear to turn into something else, something sharper, something inevitable. No, I whispered, even though I didn't know, even though every part of me had known. The moment I saw him across the street, his expression did not change, but something in the air did, something that made it impossible to breathe the way I had before. You ran, he said quietly. You hid. Another step closer. Now there was nowhere left to move. But you are not lost. His voice dropped just enough to make the words feel like they belonged only to me. And you are not leaving again. I shook my head again, but slower this time, weaker, because the truth was settling in around me like a cage I could not see. You cannot just decide that, I said. He held my gaze, unblinking, unwavering, like the answer had never been a question. I already did. I did not realize I was holding my breath until it started to hurt. The silence between us stretched too long, too heavy, like something was shifting beneath the surface of everything I thought I understood about this moment, about him, about why he was here. I swallowed, forcing air back into my lungs, but it did nothing to steady the way my heart kept racing against my ribs. You do not get to decide my life, I said. The words came out stronger than I felt, but I held on to them like they were the last thing I still owned. Something flickered in his expression, not anger, not surprise, something quieter, almost like approval, but it disappeared before I could be sure. You think this is about control, he said, his voice calm, measured, like he had already had this conversation in his head 100 times before stepping into my apartment. Then what is it about? I shot back, the question breaking through my fear, because if I stopped talking, if I let the silence take over, I knew I would lose whatever ground I still had. He tilted his head slightly, studying me, not my fear, not my words, but me, like I was something he had been searching for and finally found. Look outside, he said. I hesitated, every instinct telling me not to turn my back on him, but something in his tone, something steady, pulled me toward the window. Despite myself, I stepped sideways, never fully breaking eye contact, until I reached the edge of the blinds and pulled them apart just enough to see the street below. At first everything looked normal, streetlights glowing faint through the rain, cars passing slowly, nothing unusual, nothing threatening. What am I supposed to see? I asked, my voice quieter now, more uncertain. Keep looking, he replied. I focused harder, scanning the sidewalk, the parked cars, the shadows between buildings, and then I saw it, the same black car from earlier, still parked across the street, but now it was not empty. 2 figures sat inside, barely visible through the tinted glass, but their presence unmistakable. My stomach dropped. They have been there since before you got home, he said behind me, his voice closer now, but I had not heard him move. Watching, a chill ran through me, sharp and immediate. Who are they? I asked, already knowing I would not like the answer, already feeling the fragile sense of safety I had been clinging to crumble completely. The ones you should have been running from, he said quietly. I turned back to him too, fast, my mind struggling to catch up to what he was saying, to what this meant. No, I left that behind, I made sure of it. I shook my head, but the certainty in my voice was gone, replaced by something weaker, something breaking. You left the place, he corrected, stepping closer until the distance between us felt like a line I could not cross. Not the problem. I stared at him, searching for anything that might tell me this was a lie, that he was manipulating me, that this was just another way to control me. But there was nothing in his face except calm certainty. They found you 2 days ago, he continued. You just did not notice. My chest tightened painfully as memories flashed through my mind, the feeling of being watched, the unease I had pushed aside, the car that kept appearing in the same place. Why did you not tell me before? I demanded, even though I already knew the answer, even though part of me had already begun to understand. Because you would have run again, he said simply, and this time you would not have made it far enough. The words settled into the room, heavy, final, leaving no space for denial, no space for the fragile reality I had built over the past 6 months. I looked back at the window, the car still there, the figures still watching, and for the first time since I arrived in this city, I did not feel invisible. I felt seen, targeted, found. I turned back to him slowly, my voice barely more than a breath. So what happens now? He did not hesitate, did not look away, did not soften. Now you stop running, he said, and the way he said it made something deep inside me shift, not comfort, not relief, something more complicated, more dangerous. And you stay where I can keep you alive. I did not answer him right away because something inside me was still fighting, still holding on to the version of reality where I had control over my own life, over my own choices. But that version was fading fast with every second I stood there staring at him. You expect me to just stay here with you? I finally said. The words came out sharper than I felt like if I pushed hard enough they might break whatever hold he had on this situation. But he did not react the way I expected. He did not step closer, did not raise his voice, did not force anything. Instead, he just watched me like he was giving me space to understand something I had not yet accepted. Not here, he said quietly. This place is already compromised. The word hit me harder than anything else. Compromised, like my entire attempt at a new life had been nothing more than a temporary illusion, like everything I had built could be taken apart. In a single sentence, I glanced back toward the window again, the car still there, the figures still waiting, patient, like they knew I had nowhere else to go. My chest tightened. Then where? I asked, my voice lower now, less defiant, more uncertain, because despite everything I did not have another plan. I had run once, and it had not been enough. He moved, then finally closing the distance between us, not in a rush, not in a way that cornered me, but in a way that made it clear he was done standing on opposite sides of this conversation. With me, he said simply. I let out a small breath that felt like it had been trapped inside me for too long. You talk like that is supposed to make me feel safe, I said, but there was no real strength behind it anymore, only the truth I did not want to admit. He held my gaze steady, unshaken. It is not supposed to make you feel anything, he replied. It is supposed to keep you alive. The room fell quiet again, but this time it was different, not heavy, not suffocating, just clear, like the noise in my head had finally started to settle into something I could not ignore. I looked down at my hand, still trembling slightly, and realized something that made my stomach twist. I did not have options, not real ones, not anymore. I had already tried running, already tried disappearing, and it had only delayed this moment, not prevented. And I lifted my head slowly, meeting his eyes again. If I go with you, I said, carefully choosing each word like it mattered, because somehow it felt like it did. I am not your property. Something shifted in his expression again, subtle, but real, like I had said something important, not defiant, not weak, just necessary. I know, he said, and there was no hesitation in it, no mockery, no challenge, just certainty. Then stop saying things like that, I pushed, even though my voice was quieter now, because I needed to hold on to something, even if it was just this one line. He studied me for a long second before answering. You are right, he said. You are not mine to own. A pause, then softer, but heavier in a way I could not explain. You are mine to keep safe. The difference should not have mattered as much as it did, but it did. It changed something in the air between us, something I could not name, but could feel settling deep in my chest. I swallowed, trying to steady myself. And if I say no? I asked, even though I already knew the answer, even though I had seen it outside that window. He did not move, did not react outwardly at all, but the silence that followed said everything. Then you will run again, he said finally, and they will be closer next time. I closed my eyes for a brief second, just long enough to feel the weight of that truth sink in, before opening them again. The room looked the same, the apartment still mine, the door still locked, but none of it felt real anymore, not in the way it had before. I reached for my jacket, slowly, my movements deliberate, like if I rushed this decision it might break me completely. He did not stop me, did not rush me, did not say another word, and somehow that made it harder, not easier. I slipped the jacket on, grabbed my keys from the counter, and stood there for one last second, taking in the space I had called safe, knowing I would not come back to it, not like this, not as the person who had believed it could protect me. I turned toward him, my heart still unsteady, but my decision made, even if I did not fully understand what it meant. Then we leave now, I said quietly. He gave a single nod, like that had always been the only outcome. And as he moved toward the door, unlocking it with a calm that made everything feel inevitable, I realized something that sent a quiet chill through me. This was not the moment my life fell apart. This was the moment it changed direction entirely. The hallway felt longer than it ever had before, every step echoing too loud against the walls like the building itself was watching me leave. I stayed half a step behind him, not because he told me to, but because something in the way he moved made it feel natural, controlled, precise, like he already knew where every second would land. He opened the door to the street without hesitation. The rain had started falling steady, now soaking the pavement, turning the city into blurred reflections of light and shadow. I hesitated just inside the doorway, my eyes drifting automatically across the street. The black car was still there, exactly where it had been before. Engine off, windows dark, but now it felt different. Now I knew what I was looking at. They were not just parked, they were waiting for me. Do not look at them too long, he said quietly without turning back. They will notice. I tore my gaze away immediately, my pulse jumping at how easily he read me, how easily he controlled even where I looked. Are they watching right now? I asked, stepping out into the rain beside him, the cold drops hitting my skin sharp, grounding. He moved toward a sleek black car parked just a few feet away, the door already unlocked like everything had been arranged before I even made my decision. They have been watching for hours, he replied, opening the passenger door for me, his tone calm. Like this was routine, like this was normal. I paused for half a second, the open door in front of me feeling like a line once crossed I could not uncross. If they are watching, why are they not stopping us? I asked. He met my eyes, then steady, unbothered. Because they are not sure yet, he said, and they will not act until they are certain. I slid into the seat before I could think too much about it. The interior was quiet, insulated from the outside world in a way that made everything feel distant. Unreal. He closed the door gently before moving around the front and getting into the driver's seat. The engine started smoothly, almost silently, and within seconds we were moving, pulling away from the curb, like nothing unusual was happening, like I was not leaving behind the only life I had tried to build for myself. I kept my eyes forward, resisting the urge to look back at the apartment, at the street, at the car that had been waiting for me. Where are we going? I asked, my voice softer now, less guarded, because something had shifted the moment I stepped into this car. He did not answer right away, his focus on the road steady, unbroken. Somewhere they cannot reach you easily, he said finally. The city lights passed by in streaks of gold and white reflecting against the windshield, the rain growing heavier with each block, like the night itself was trying to wash everything clean, erase what had just happened. You say that like there is no place they cannot reach, I said. He let out a quiet breath, not quite a sigh, not quite amusement. There is no place they cannot try to reach, he corrected. But there are places where trying becomes a mistake. I turned my head slightly, studying his profile, the calm control in every movement, the way nothing about him seemed rushed or uncertain. And your place is one of those places, I said. It was not really a question. He glanced at me briefly, then back to the road. Yes. The simplicity of his answer should not have been enough to reassure me, but somehow it was not because I trusted him, but because he believed it completely, and that belief carried weight. We drove in silence for a while, the city slowly changing around us, the crowded streets giving way to quieter roads, taller buildings rising in the distance, glass and steel reflecting the storm above. You planned this, I said after a few minutes, the realization settling in slowly. You knew you would come get me tonight. He did not deny it. I knew they were getting closer, he said, and I knew you would not leave on your own. I let out a small breath, leaning back against the seat, the truth of that statement sinking in deeper than I wanted to admit. So, you decided for me, I said quietly. He shook his head once. No, he said. I removed the illusion that you had time. The words lingered in the air between us, heavy but honest. And for the first time since all of this started, I did not argue, because deep down I knew he was right. I had been running on borrowed time, and tonight it finally ran out as the car turned into a private drive lined with tall gates that began to open before we even slowed down. I felt something tighten in my chest, not fear, not exactly, something else, something closer to realization that whatever waited behind those gates was not just a place to hide. It was a place that would change everything about what came next. The gates closed behind us without a sound, and that was the first thing that made my chest tighten. Not the height of them, not the security cameras that tracked our movement, not even the long, winding driveway that separated this place from the rest of the city. It was the silence, the kind that did not belong to empty spaces, but to controlled ones, to places where nothing happened unless someone allowed it to happen. I watched through the window, As we drove deeper into the property, trees lining both sides, perfectly spaced lights embedded along the ground guiding the path, like it had been designed to lead people exactly where they were meant to go, no more, no less. "This is where you live?" I asked quietly, my voice almost lost in the low hum of the engine. He did not look at me. "This is where I operate," he corrected, and something about that choice of words made the space feel even less like a home and more like something else, something structured, something intentional. The car slowed as the building came into view, tall glass and steel rising against the dark sky, modern, clean, almost too precise, like every line had been planned to send a message. Power, without noise, control, without display. The car came to a smooth stop near the entrance. Before I could reach for the handle, my door opened from the outside. A man in a dark suit stepped back immediately after giving me space. His eyes flicked to Alexander for a brief second before returning to neutral, like he already knew exactly how to behave without being told. I stepped out slowly, the ground beneath my feet solid but unfamiliar. The rain had softened to a light mist, now clinging to the air rather than falling, and for a moment I just stood there, taking it in, the building, the people, the quiet coordination of everything around me. "You do not have to be afraid here," Alexander said from behind me, his voice closer than I expected. I turned slightly, meeting his gaze. "That is easy for you to say," I replied. He held my eyes for a second, longer than necessary, not dismissing my fear, not correcting it, just acknowledging it in a way that felt unsettlingly calm. "Fear is useful," he said, "but only when it is pointed in the right direction." I did not respond because I was not sure what direction mine was supposed to point anymore. He gestured toward the entrance, and this time I did not hesitate. I moved forward. The doors opened automatically as we approached, revealing a lobby that looked more like a high-end hotel than anything else. Polished marble floors, soft lighting, clean lines, everything quiet, everything controlled. A woman behind the front desk gave a slight nod as we passed, her attention focused entirely on him, not curious, not surprised, just aware. "They all know you," I said under my breath as we walked toward the elevators. "They know their roles," he replied simply. The elevator doors opened before we reached them, like someone had already called it for us. We stepped inside and the doors closed smoothly, sealing us into a smaller, quieter space. The numbers began to rise one by one, the motion steady, predictable. "How many people work for you?" I asked, the question slipping out before I could stop it. He glanced at me briefly. "Enough." Not a number, not an explanation, just another controlled answer. I let out a small breath, leaning back slightly against the wall. The elevator continued upward, higher than I expected, each floor passing without stopping until finally it slowed and came to a gentle halt. The doors opened to a private level, no reception, no other people, just a wide hallway leading to a single door at the end. "This is you," I said, more statement than question. He stepped forward, unlocking the door with a simple motion before pushing it open and stepping aside to let me enter. First, I hesitated only for a second before crossing the threshold. The space inside was open, expansive floor to ceiling windows overlooking the city, lights stretching out in every direction, furniture minimal but precise, everything placed with intention, nothing out of place. It did not feel empty, it felt curated, like every detail had been chosen carefully to reflect control. I moved a few steps further and turning slowly to take it all in. "You expect me to stay here?" I said quietly. He closed the door behind us, the sound soft but final. "I expect you to be safe here," he corrected. I turned back to him, my arms crossing instinctively over my chest, not defensive, not entirely, just grounding. "And what happens when I decide to leave?" I asked. His expression did not change, but something in the room shifted again, subtle but unmistakable, like the answer had always been there waiting. "Then you will understand why you cannot," he said, and the calm certainty in his voice made it clear that whatever this place was, it was not just protection, it was a line I had already crossed without realizing it. For a moment, I just stood there in the middle of the room, trying to understand what he had really said, because it was not a threat, not in the way I expected. It was worse. It was certainly the kind that did not need to raise its voice. I let out a slow breath, turning away from him and walking toward the windows. The city stretched out below, endless lights moving in patterns that suddenly felt distant, like a world I had stepped out of without realizing it. I pressed my hand lightly against the glass, cool, solid, real. "You keep saying safe, like that is the only thing that matters," I said quietly, my reflection staring back at me, unfamiliar, tired, but still fighting. It is the only thing that matters right now, he replied behind me, his voice steady, unshaken. I shook my head slightly, not agreeing, not fully disagreeing, just struggling with the weight of it. You are asking me to give up everything, I said, turning back to face him. My job, my apartment, my life. He watched me without interrupting, letting me finish like he wanted to hear every piece of it. For what? I asked finally. For a room in a building where I am not allowed to leave. The words landed sharper than I intended, but I did not take them back. He stepped closer, not enough to crowd me, just enough to make sure I could not ignore him. You think you had a life out there, he said quietly. You had a pause. Something in my chest tightened at that, not because I agreed, but because a part of me understood exactly what he meant. I crossed my arms more out of instinct than defiance. And this is what then? I asked, a cage. His gaze did not waver. No, he said, this is where you stop being hunted. The word hung between us, heavy, unavoidable. I looked away for a second, trying to gather my thoughts, trying to hold on to something solid. You still have not told me who they are, I said, my voice lower, now more focused, because this mattered more than anything else. He did not answer immediately, and that silence told me more than his words would have. You know, I said slowly, watching him carefully. You know exactly who they are. His jaw tightened just slightly, the only sign that I had hit something real. Yes, he admitted finally, and the weight of that single word settled into the room. Then tell me. I pushed, taking a step closer, now matching his distance, refusing to stay on the outside of this anymore. If I am supposed to trust you, I need to know what I am running from. His eyes held mine for a long second, measuring something, deciding something, and when he spoke again, his voice was lower, more deliberate. You are not running from them, he said. You already crossed them. My breath caught the shift in his words, subtle but significant. I do not even know them, I said, confusion mixing with something sharper, something colder. You do not need to know someone to become a problem to them, he replied. I searched his face for anything more, any detail, any explanation, but he was giving me only what he chose. That does not make sense, I said, shaking my head. Because it did not, because none of this did. It will, he said, and that answer frustrated me more than anything else, because it was not an answer at all. When I demanded, the word sharper, now pushing against the control he held over every part of this situation, he stepped even closer this time, close enough that the space between us disappeared entirely, not touching, but close enough that I could feel the shift in the air between us. When you stop asking the wrong questions, he said quietly. My breath faltered just slightly at the closeness, at the intensity of it. Not fear, not entirely. Something else, something I did not want to name. Then tell me the right one, I said, refusing to step back, refusing to give ground. He held my gaze unwavering, and for a second the world outside the room disappeared completely. The right question is not who they are, he said. It is why they are watching you. The words landed differently this time, not like a warning, but like a key, something that unlocked a door I had not realized was there. My mind raced, going over everything the past 6 months, the move, the job, the quiet routine, the moments I had ignored, the feeling of being watched. I did nothing, I said, but the certainty was gone, replaced by doubt, by memory, by the possibility that I had missed something important. Think again, he said softly, and that was when it hit me. Not a full answer, not yet, just a fragment, a moment. I had dismissed a face I had seen once, and then tried to forget. My stomach dropped as realization began to take shape, and for the first time since this started, I understood something clearly. This was not random, this was not bad luck, this was something I had stepped into without knowing, and now there was no stepping out. I should have trusted my instincts the moment the memory surfaced, because it did not come back gently. It hit all at once, sharp and clear, like something I had buried on purpose. A night shift at the cafe 2 weeks ago, a man who did not fit the place, too polished, too aware, sitting alone in the corner, watching, not drinking, not using his phone, just watching me. I remembered the way his eyes followed every movement, the way I felt it, even when I tried to ignore it. No, I whispered, more to myself than to him, shaking my head as the pieces started falling into place. That was nothing, it was just a customer. But even as I said it, I knew it was not true. I had known it then too, I just chose not to see it. Tell me, I said, looking back at Alexander, my voice tighter now. Tell me what I missed. He did not answer right away, his eyes studying me like he was waiting for me to reach the conclusion on my own, like this was something I needed to understand without being handed the answer. He sat near the back. I continued slowly, my thoughts pulling the memory apart piece by piece. Ordered coffee, did not drink it, stayed for almost an hour. My breath hitched slightly as more details surfaced. He left before my shift ended, but the next day, I saw the same car outside. I looked at him, then searching his face for confirmation for anything that would tell me I was not imagining this. That is not a coincidence, is it? He gave a small, almost imperceptible shake of his head. No. The single word settled heavily. In the space between us, I let out a slow breath, my mind racing faster, now connecting things I had tried to keep separate. Why me? I asked the question, slipping out before I could stop it, because that was the part that made no sense. I was not important. I was not connected. I had done everything to disappear, because you saw something you were not supposed to see. He said quietly, the answer simple, but it hit harder than anything else. I frowned slightly, confusion tightening in my chest. I did not see anything. I insisted, but even as I said it, doubt crept in again, because there had been that moment, that one brief second. I had stepped outside to take out the trash, the alley behind the cafe, dimly lit, almost empty, except for two men standing near the back door, speaking low, too low for me to hear. I had not paid attention, not really. I had just walked past, kept my head down, gone back inside the alley. I said slowly, the words forming as the memory sharpened. I walked out there one night. They were talking. I did not even look at them. I swallowed hard, the realization settling deeper. But they saw me. Alexander did not confirm it directly, but he did not need to. His silence said enough. You became a variable, he said instead, and variables get washed until they are understood. My stomach dropped, the simplicity of it terrifying, because it meant this was not personal, not emotional, just calculated. So they do not even know if I matter. I said, my voice quieter, now more controlled. Not yet, he replied, but they will find out. I turned away from him again, walking a few steps toward the center of the room, my mind spinning, trying to process what this meant. And if they decide I do matter? I asked, already feeling the answer before he said it. He did not respond immediately, and that pause was enough to make my chest tighten again. Then they will not wait outside in a car, he said finally, his tone calm, but the meaning clear. I closed my eyes for a brief second, letting the weight of that settle in before opening them again. The room felt different now, not just controlled, not just contained, but necessary, like the only place where the rules had changed in my favor. You knew all of this, I said, turning back to him slowly. You knew why they were watching me before you came to get me? He nodded once, yes. I let out a small breath, not quite anger, not quite relief, something in between. And you still did not tell me, I said. He stepped closer again, not closing the distance completely this time, just enough to hold my attention. Because you needed to understand it, he said, not hear it. I studied him for a long second, the calm in his expression, the certainty in his voice, the way everything about him suggested he had already planned every step from the moment this started. So what now? I asked the question, quieter now, but more focused, because this was the part that mattered. Now they know you are gone, he said, and they will try to understand why. A chill ran through me at that, the idea of being analyzed, of being traced, even from a distance. Can they find me here? I asked. He held my gaze steady, unwavering. They can try. He said the same words as before, but now they carried more weight, more meaning. And if they do? I pressed, needing to hear it, needing to understand the risk. He did not hesitate this time, his answer immediate, certain. Then they will learn that you are not alone. And something in the way he said it, something quiet and absolute, made my breath catch. Because for the first time since all of this began, I realized he was not just protecting me from them. He was placing himself directly between us. And whatever that meant, it was not something I could walk away from anymore. The room felt quieter after that, not empty, not calm, just settled, like something had finally locked into place inside me. I walked back toward the window, slowly, my reflection staring back at me again, but this time it looked different, not safer, not stronger, just aware. I rested my hand lightly against the glass, watching the city below, the movement, the noise, the life that kept going, like nothing had changed, even though everything had for me. So that is it then, I said quietly without turning around. I stay here and they stay out there. There was a pause behind me, not hesitation, just space, like he was choosing his words carefully. For now, he said, and something about that answer made my chest tighten again, because it was not permanent, it was not a guarantee. It was a moment of fragile balance. I let out a small breath, nodding slightly more to myself than to him. For now, I repeated the words, feeling them settle differently than I expected. I turned back to face him fully this time. No distance, no turning away, just standing there, meeting his gaze directly. You said I crossed them. I continued, my voice steady but quieter, now more focused, that I became a problem without knowing it. He nodded once, yes. I held his eyes, refusing to look away, even as the weight of everything pressed in around me. Then what does that make you? I asked the question, leaving my mouth before I could soften it, because I needed to understand where he stood in all of this, not just what he was doing, but why he was doing it. Something shifted in his expression again, subtle, but real, not defensive, not dismissive, just something deeper, something harder to read. It makes me the reason they have not come closer yet, he said simply, and the certainty in his voice made something in my chest tighten in a completely different way this time. Not fear, not confusion, something else, something that felt dangerously close to trust. One studied him for a long second, taking in the way he stood, the way nothing about him wavered, the way every part of him seemed anchored in a reality I was only just beginning to understand. And if they decide you are not enough to stop them? I asked. Quietly, he did not look away, did not hesitate. Then they will learn otherwise. The answer came without force, without volume, but it carried weight more than anything else he had said since I met him. I looked down briefly at my hands, no longer shaking, not because I felt safe, but because I understood something now, something that changed the way I saw this situation entirely. I was not just hiding, I was not just being protected, I was part of something that had already begun long before I realized it. I lifted my gaze back to him slowly. You said, I am not your property. I said the words careful, measured, because they mattered. He nodded once. You are not. I took a step closer, closing the last bit of distance between us, not because I was drawn to him, but because I needed to stand on equal ground, even if it was only for a moment. Then stop deciding everything for me. I said quietly, stop telling me what I cannot do. Something in his posture shifted slightly, not retreat, not resistance, just acknowledgement. Then tell me what you want to do, he replied. And for the first time since this started, the control shifted, even if only slightly, even if only for a second. I held his gaze, feeling the weight of that question settle into me deeper than anything else had tonight, because it was not about fear, it was not about running, it was about choice, something I thought I had lost. I looked back toward the window, once more the city, still moving, still distant, then back to him, the answer forming slowly, not perfect, not certain, but mine. I want to understand what I stepped into, I said finally, my voice steady in a way it had not been before. And I want to know why you stepped in with me. The room went quiet again, but this time it was different, not heavy, not controlled, just open, like something had shifted between us in a way that could not be undone. He studied me for a long second, and when he spoke, his voice was lower, more deliberate than before. Because the moment you became a target, he said, you became my responsibility. The words settled into the space between us, changing everything about how I saw him, how I saw this place, how I saw what came next. And as I stood there in that quiet, controlled room with the city stretching out below, I realized something I had been too afraid to admit before. This was not just about survival anymore. This was about understanding a world I had already been pulled into. And whether I wanted to or not, I was not standing outside of it anymore. I was standing right in the center of it with him.